Demand generation is defined by the point that you can convince strangers to buy from you.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, which has actually been designed for revenue leaders who aren't afraid to say they're stuck and they actually need a real answer. I'm Karl Ortmans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic, which is a fun one and it's a big one, demand gen. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by the great team at Virtual Causeway. Imagine your sales team spending less time chasing and more time working with clients because the buyers already know your name before that first call. Now, that's exactly what Virtual Causeway does. They help B2B companies get found earlier in the buying process by the right people through the right channels that actually influence decisions today. The result for them is fewer cold calls, better conversations, and pipeline that moves faster. You can visit them at virtualcauseway.com and don't forget to mention the show for a special rate. Many companies build a demand gen engine and they just leave it alone. They get it running, it hits a number, and they just move on. Now, today's guest is going to tell you, well, that's actually backwards. The engine is never finished, and the moment that you think it is, it's already starting to break. My guest today is Brydon McMillen. Now, here's a fun fact about Brydon. He didn't come up through marketing. He came up running pilot plants and drafting electrical diagrams for billion-dollar transit and energy projects with a chemical engineering degree from the University of Waterloo. Okay, the pivot, it happened almost by accident. As a co-op student at Clio, the legal tech company, he got handed a chatbot that nobody else wanted to touch. He rebuilt it, and it actually drove a 352% increase in qualified leads. It's a company record. Now, there's interesting here. Engineering brain, solving a marketing problem. So from there, he became the first hire at a scrappy little agency called 2Byte Digital. His job was to build the paid search function from nothing. So he did. And from a team of one to a full department managing a 7-figure budget for hypergrowth SaaS brands. 2.5 years later, 2Byte gets acquired for 7 figures. Now, he stayed on, he got promoted to director in 9 months, and all along the way, he pushed client conversion rates up 55% and cut acquisition costs by 35% just by testing relentlessly. Then this year, he did it all over again and on purpose. He left to found his own shop, Plateau PPC. Now, 3 months in, 0 to 26,000 a month in recurring revenue. So when Brydon says a demand gen engine is never finished, he's not being funny. He's the guy who's built one from scratch or from zero more times than most people want to do it in a career. Brydon, welcome to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Karl. I'm happy to be here. And I think I might need you as my full-time hype man. That was a very flattering intro.
I will happily do that, and I think a few people have said, "Hey, can you come with me and do this?" Actually,
Yeah.
one of the CEOs said, "Hey, when at my funeral, can you come and just reread that so everybody knows that I was pretty awesome?"
Yeah.
Cool. So, hey, can you tell the audience a little bit about your world? Like, what industries or verticals are you working in? What are your selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm working, my world is paid search essentially. So running ads on Google Ads, I guess on Bing Ads as well. OpenAI ads has been a thing more recently, and just trying to help companies grow and hit their KPI targets through that platform specifically. I have experience with kind of other demand gen stuff, but I've narrowed into this lane because I wanted to pick a very focused lane where I know that I can crush it and do really excellent results for any clients. And that's the one that really appealed to me. And the clients that I'm working with are generally in the fintech space, insurtech, also just SaaS more broadly, and also some e-commerce. So being a sort of a channel specific expert, I try and niche down into specific industries, but also the skill set applies across a lot. So you can, if you know how to run ads really well for, a SaaS company, you can probably also run them pretty well for a local dental clinic or whatever. But yeah, the general ICP that I'm targeting is SaaS and fintech companies that are between around 10 million a year to 100 million a year in revenue.
Nice. And obviously you've done that a few times, so you know exactly what that world is.
Yeah.
Nice. So here's how we got to today's topic is I asked Brydon, just like everybody, what's a successful revenue initiative you ever led or an existing revenue challenge you're either solving or you're currently solving or have solved? Now, we pretty quickly landed on the topic of this one right here. It's building a demand gen engine from scratch. Now, if we can kick off today's conversation with this one, Brydon, and go from here. A lot of people I talk to, they talk about building a demand gen engine like it's a construction project with an actual finish line, but it's actually never finished. So, what does done even mean to you day to day? Is there a version of done, or is the demand gen engine constantly in flux?
Yeah. So I can approach that from a couple perspectives. The first one I'll talk about the sort of go to market, building a demand gen engine from zero, which is what I'm doing for myself with Plateau PPC. And even though my skill set is primarily in paid search, I'm obviously not just relying entirely just off of paid search to grow. With any service based industry, you generally find operators who are landing clients through their referral network and just through people that they know. You do a really good job with one client, they tell their friend about it. You have your existing network from wherever your previous jobs were and things like that. Um, that's okay, but if you're in that situation as an agency owner, freelancer, I would say you don't actually have a demand generation engine, right? Demand generation is defined by the point that you can convince strangers to buy from you. And so that would be kind of the finish line, I would say, is the point where you have a funnel that's set up, an offer that you've probably tested extensively, and some kind of awareness generating source to get people in front of your offer and then actually convert them. And then once you figure that out, then essentially you will have something that you can just continue to pour time or money or whatever it is into that traffic generating source, and that with enough people coming through, they will be reliably converted into customers at some percentage.
I want to come back to, I'd like to go into your, well, like what you're doing with Plateau. But I'd like to, if we can back up a little bit to get us to today. When you're doing, because the paid search, and even you said about you doing some open AI ads as well. So I'd like to get to that in a little bit, but let's go back to where you started and how you've done this. So I'm thinking about you're building it from day one, and somebody who's listening to this going like, okay, Brydon, there's ads, there's search, and I like how you said, it's strangers who can buy from you. It's a good way of approaching it, and I haven't heard somebody say it that in that way. So building it from scratch, where do you even begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think you want to begin with probably with your offer. And so for example, the offer that I'm providing is generally paid search, fully managed account on an ongoing basis. But then there can be and that's with like some sort of flat monthly retainer cost. But of course, that's something that in the earlier stages you want to be very open to testing. So I know that kind of model works. I've seen it work at the previous agencies that I've worked at, but there are other skill set and same expertise, and they take a much more volume approach. They scale their personal brand to the point that they do paid workshops on PPC, and so you're getting a smaller amount of revenue per customer, but you can get way more customers. There's other people who are doing project based work, which you need a consistent flow of customers to come in because you're not making that recurring revenue. But it's probably easier to sell a project, a one-time fee to somebody than ongoing, monthly payment. So being very flexible with testing out the offer that you have, and then also being very flexible with testing out what channels you actually want to drive that traffic from. So um, my recommendation would be, because you're going back to your question, where to start. My recommendation would be don't be married to any particular starting point. You want to be trying out different channels, be super open to pivoting and changing channels. I mean, this is just kind of startup 101 mindset, I suppose. So whether you're driving that traffic through your organic socials because you're posting really compelling content on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn that is getting in front of your, potential buyers, and then um, that could be your channel. It could be paid social. You could do the same thing, but put ad money behind it. You could do paid search. There's a lot of creative things you could do. A lot of it is founder led business development. So going out to in-person conferences and events and meeting people there. Um, so yeah, I think until you find something that you can clearly just start to double down on, like I said, until you found something where, okay, you can reliably close strangers who have no idea who you are. So that would include generating the awareness, so having them first hear about who you are, having the consideration phase, so all the trust building elements in place. So I think things like content help. Like if this if I end up reposting this podcast to my LinkedIn profile and people come here and they say, oh, he was on the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, like I can hear how he thinks about things and I can gain a little bit more trust on that. So you want to have that stage of the funnel, and then there's your sales part. Make sure that you um, are actually closing deals when somebody comes to you who's in your ICP and they're interested and they've built a little bit of trust with you by engaging with your content or something like that. Make sure that you actually know how to close that deal, and present them with an offer that makes sense for them to want to purchase. Um, so yeah, I took that question in a few different directions, but I
Yeah.
would say the starting place is obviously make people aware of what you're doing, figure out what you want to offer them, and don't be completely attached to uh, either one of those things, whether it's whatever you initially thought that your offer was going to be, or whatever you thought your ideal, traffic or awareness source was going to be. You can always, pivot and find something new that works better.
One of the things that I actually have done is I've become Sangram Vajri and Brian Brown have GTMOS partners, and so one of the things I've done this year is I've become certified in GTMOS partners, which has been really interesting to go in through. And one of the things that I do really like is that they talk about, and one of the aspects that we suggest to early companies is build with scaffolding, don't build with concrete. And what I mean by that is you're going to, like you're saying, like you're building something, you're going to see how it goes. When you build with scaffolding, you can take it down and move it around, etc. But if you build it with like, this is the only way it's going to do, concrete's a little bit harder to move. So I'm using that as an analogy.
Yeah, it's
But
a
the
good
building
analogy.
with, but
Yeah.
this building with scaffolding is interesting. So, and I just wrote down listening to you is like, so where do you start? Do you start with the strategy and like iteration, or do you start with tech?
Um, I mean, personally, I think you want to start with. Well, what do you mean by that exactly? Are you talking about? Let's just make this sort of example based, and then I can sort of wrap my head around it a bit better. But is this an entrepreneur who has an idea for a need in the market, and like that's the stage that they're at, or are we talking about somebody who maybe has like some kind of an MVP of what their product or service is going to look like? What are we thinking there?
So admittedly, I asked it super vague because looking at your background, you've done it in a couple of different phases and scales.
Right.
So I was actually hoping you'd pick one of like, so take it from a couple of, if I'm an entrepreneur, I have something, I'm just going to bring it to market and I got to build something. So I'm going to get strangers to my
Mhm.
website, or I'm going to get strangers to buy from me. So there's one thing, but then there's a second part of like in that scaling mode and some of the bigger things where, now I have to take the either how do I change my strategy or what do I deploy? Because there's people that I know that I've talked to on the podcast that, and even people that have contacted me about the podcast and said, hey, I used that thing from that guest. And we talked about we
Mhm.
had a really good conversation. So we have either way, all the way from scaling companies to, very mature businesses and growing companies. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about of where do you start from building a demand gen engine? Is it
I
from
see.
that first person, or even, hey, look, when you get into a scaling I'm just going to use Clio. I don't know exactly, so I'll frame it this way. When you join Clio, if Clio was a 250 person company and they had an engine going, but you're like, oh, it actually has to be retooled or readjusted. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about in a couple of different phases. Hey, to get started, here's what you do. And once you get going, go back to that engine and adjust it and fine tune it, because I think that's one of the core things that you're really passionate about.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that is true. So I guess my initial statement was, if a few questions back, that if you don't have a um, if you don't have the ability to sell to strangers, then you don't really have a demand generation engine. But it's not the case that if you don't have the ability to sell to strangers, you can still have a business, right? But your
Mm.
business is going to start how a lot of businesses start if they aren't, heavily funded, or especially if it's somebody's first time business, is family and friends, or just anybody that's in your network. So you can begin a lot of this testing and iteration and figuring out what your positioning should be, what kind of product or service or offering is really appealing to people, by first just being the one man sales team who goes around to people that or who goes around doing cold email and cold calling, whatever, and finding individuals who are either resonating with what you're doing, or you need to pivot. So that's a that's a very common thing in the agency world, or even the freelancer world, when it comes to marketing services, is that some people start off just closing people in their network, and so they still have a business, they still are generating revenue, but they don't have a demand generation engine necessarily.
I'm putting two things together because it's interesting, and maybe this is part of how you think about the demand gen engine build. That founder led sales, like you were talking about, is like network and etc. So, do you really need to have a demand gen engine for the founder led sales initially? It doesn't sound like you do, but once you start to get those strangers, then it almost sounds like that's that tipping point of scaling, and have to have that engine in place in order to get more of those strangers to become customers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, once you're able to, because the demand generation engine, as I kind of touched on earlier, is the way I view it is, it's how do you generate awareness, and then how do you generate consideration, and then how do you close the sale. Those are essentially the three different brackets that it kind of falls into, and any of your actions, and all three of these are going to be moving targets. So, touching on what you were talking about earlier, with how do you revisit and continue to revamp and improve, I think if you just continue to look back at those um, three different buckets, and how has the context changed? So, are we an established enough company now that we can generate significant amounts of awareness by hosting our own, big conferences? Because that's what Clio used to do. Well, still does, is have an annual Clio Con, which all the lawyers across like North America, come and attend. It's like the biggest conference in legal tech, or maybe just in legal in general. And then so that could be how your awareness piece can shift once you become a bigger, more established player. The same tactics that got you from 0 to 10 million are probably significantly different from the ones that get you from 10 million to 100, and from 100 to a billion, etc. So
Yeah, I like that you're calling that out, because it's sort of like that iteration, right? The scaling you're solving. You're looking at problem market fit early on. So your demand gen engine for problem market fit is going to be a little bit more. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that problem market fit of like really bringing it to market? Maybe that transitional phase from founder led sales into small sales team trying to find new strangers. What does that engine look like? What would you advise people to think about, or how much of a strategy do you put into that initial phase, or is it more, look, we have a hypothesis, we're gonna test, we're gonna iterate, we're gonna see what happens, and then we're gonna make a decision on whether or not it's working or not?
Yeah, I've generally operated more on the, stay flexible, stay adaptable, because, all the companies that I've worked for have been in like a very small kind of startup phase. Now I'm building my own startup. A lot of the clients that we work with are also startup. Like I said, 10 to 100 million is the still, clearly an established company, but small enough that there's still a lot of things that you're able to question and pivot on at any given time. So, there's clients that we'll work with that are doing 50, 100 million a year, and they are, um, launching a new product, and then 2 months later saying, actually, let's just pause all our ads on that product because I don't think we have the funnel, or the price point or anything finely tuned enough. It's not where it needs to be. So frameworks are good. Frameworks can take you a long way, but staying extremely adaptable at this size and uh, at this sort of pace of the market is super crucial.
So what's one of the challenges you're looking and you're solving with your customers now? And you've obviously got a good a really strong background in this. So
Hmm.
when you're starting to work with your customers, are you starting in the ads side of things? Are you looking at the offering like you're talking about? Are you looking at the technology? Are you looking at the framework that you bring in? Like where are you actually starting with this?
Yeah. Uh, so I think this is a bit of a pivot from what I had been talking about, because building my own demand generation from scratch um, is involving lots of different channels being tested, lots of different tactics. When it comes to the services that I provide, we stay, pretty focused on one channel, which is paid search. Clients might be running paid social, but maybe they're doing that in-house or they have a different agency. Sometimes we run that, but generally we're staying very focused on the paid search side of things. And so on that channel in particular, we're just extremely knowledgeable and have tons of experience on all the different pitfalls and the ways that brands can waste money. And then like all the different ways that you can buy low intent, non-converting keywords without realizing it, and how to fix that, as well as making sure that the actual person behind the search is somebody that's in your kind of ICP. Because let's just say that you're selling, for example, a B2B banking software. And so you want to find SMBs, and your ideal customer is probably, I don't know, VP of finance or something like that. Uh, Somebody might search uh, alternative banking apps or neo banking solutions or something like that. And there could be the VP finance who searches that, and then there could also be some completely unrelated intern or student who searches that. So people think that the Google Ads success comes all down to the keywords, and that's a big component. But actually making sure that the Google algorithm is trained up on the right data to be able to know who the person is behind the search, and make sure that it's bidding on those types of people that are actually in your target market, is where a lot of the actual value comes in.
Hmm. Okay, so now as you're looking at in these search terms, like, have the metrics changed, or the focus areas that you are now looking at from a metrics perspective? So when you work with clients, has that changed on what you're actually tracking today versus what it is when you started at Clio or 2Byte or something?
Yes, definitely. So since then, so that was 2019. Since then, some pretty major things have happened. Obviously, AI overviews, we know about that. So trying to make sure that you have some visibility into that is important. And the ways to do that, it's actually interesting. The way to make sure that you have visibility into the AI overview with paid search is to make sure that you're running things like broad match, AI max, and performance max. And so for anybody who doesn't know kind of what those are, they are Google's most broad. oh, they're Google's most broad kind of ad inventories. So they give you the least amount of control over what the search query and who the person that's going to actually search is, which has the potential to lead to a lot of danger, because Google's machine learning is going to, if you give it the room to do it and you don't put a ton of guardrails, it's going to go and spend your money, learning and figuring things out through trial and error. But of course, it's going to be wasting your ad budget all the while, trying to figure out what kind of keywords should I be bidding on. And it's going to bid on very random things that are very far outside of, what is actually a high intent query. So in the old days, maybe you just said, we're just going to ignore broad match and we're going to just not use it at all, because it, expands into all these areas that are low profit, and it just raises our CPA. And, maybe it's great for Google's quarterly earnings report, but it's not really great for us as an advertiser. Nowadays, if you want that visibility into those AI overviews, which of course every advertiser does, you sort of have to dance with the devil there. And you need to be leveraging these ad types, but then just figuring out which guardrails to apply to them and how to make, how to steer them in the right direction so that they're buying as little of these, wasteful queries as possible, and buying as much of the good stuff as possible. That's one thing. So the AI overviews is one of the major changes since then. The other huge, gigantic change is cookie consent stuff. So I would say in 2019, you could pretty reliably just look at your Google Ads account. What are we spending? What is our conversions? And you could trust that conversions number, relatively accurately, with plus or minus, 10%. Now the conversions number in the account is not really something that I think you can rely on, especially for B2B lead gen, especially for companies with longer sales funnels, because so many users are opting out of having cookies accepted. Google has ways to try and track conversions even if there aren't cookies, but those are not perfect. So now you just expect a lot less reliability of your conversion data. So attribution has become a gigantic part of, are we going to use, UTMs here, and we're going to sort of trust the data more in the CRM? Are we going to trust the data more in Google Analytics? And how do we do multi-channel attribution? So Google and Facebook both have a touch point for a customer, and so both of them take full credit for that. But then it ends up that you end up having duplicated, there was only $100 in revenue, but Google's saying that it generated 100 and Facebook's saying it generated 100, so it adds up to 200. So how do you do that multi-channel attribution? All those things, while they were, a part of the paid marketing, demand gen game in 2019, they are much more challenging and complex now.
So I like where we are, because this is one of the interesting ones, because that whole AI overview, as soon as Google saw that, like we saw website traffic just drop off. Like there was a substantial drop off, because I don't have to go to your website to get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And you said broad match, and then you said a couple other ones. You said, what were the other ones that you said with Google?
Okay, so yeah, broad match is when you put in a keyword, and Google takes that keyword as like a basis and like the vibe of it. So I could put in, tennis shoes for sale as my keyword because I'm selling tennis shoes, and somebody could search, athletic apparel. That could be their search, and it will match that. It will show up. I know you didn't ask about that, but I'm just gonna lay out all three. That's broad match.
Okay.
AI Max is essentially just a rebranded version of an older ad inventory that Google's always had called dynamic search. It doesn't seem to be much different from dynamic search. So you don't even put in a keyword at all. You simply just it simply reads your website. It scans your website, looks through like the copy that's on there, and then it comes up with who it thinks are going to be the best kind of users and the best keywords based on that. And then lastly, Performance Max is an ad type where the targeting is similar to kind of AI Max, where you don't put in keywords. It does an automated, like you give it signals, but then it kind of goes and it chooses who it wants to kind of bid on without a ton of user input. But Performance Max is also different because it bundles in all of Google's ad inventories. So not just Google Search and Google Shopping, but also YouTube, Display Network, Gmail, Discover, all of these ad inventories that are a little bit more in the awareness realm of things. I also think are a little bit more spammy, which is another reason that users often will turn on Performance Max and then get 100 leads in a day for $10 and be like, okay, all of these leads are complete junk. They're like fake names, fake emails and stuff. Because some of these ad networks that Google has, they just have way too low of a barrier to entry. Like to become a Google display partner, there's like no barrier to entry. So any website can become a display partner. And then there's like bot farms that go and click on these because they own the website, so they get like the 0.001 cents of affiliate revenue for every click. And so there's a whole can of worms of a fraud and spam out there that you need to carefully navigate also as a demand gen specialist.
I actually wish I should have asked you about this topic like 1 minute into the podcast, because I'm more okay. So we've got those three search terms: there's Broad Max, AI Max, and Performance Max. And somebody trying to turn on, because it's all through, like you said, the AI overview, and seeing how that has all changed. And even like you said, the cookie consent. I remember having to work through this project, and we used CookieBot as that was one of them that you had to put on, so that, and with all the GDPR regulations and all there, like there's a different world that's happening in front of us, especially with that AI overview. So on this question here, where should somebody put their money if they're starting to do it? Like, are you suggesting, like, would you suggest the broad, the AI, the Performance Max, or is it all three? How would I, as somebody who's just starting a business, or even I have a business and I need to rethink my SEO or my search spend, what do I do?
Yeah. Well, this is a little bit of a 180 from what I was just talking about, but if it's your first, $1,000, your first $2,000, I would actually probably put that in the sort of exact match terms, because then that 100% of the there's 3 keyword match types, so you can put in the same keyword, but you can have them each to different levels of how much Google's willing to like expand beyond like the actual term that you put in. So exact match, the name implies that the keyword has to match exactly. It actually just means it has to be like very, very close. And then phrase match is like even broader than that. And then broad match is the broadest one. So I would suggest, if you're just trying to validate the platform and figure out if you can, if you even have the, a landing page set up and configured in a way where you can actually put money into Google Ads and get leads at a, profitable rate, I'd probably start with exact match and just avoid all of that sort of spammy traffic. But then the reason that we end up using these, these broad match and AI Max and PA Max, is for like, you want to be in the AI overviews, ideally, if you have the budget to spare, but it's not going to be the way that you're going to be able to tangibly measure like very quick, like payback revenue. Like the best ROI thing I would say would be the exact match terms.
Okay, and so in order to get into, because this is something I don't know, so I'm asking as a, I don't know how to, I didn't know this. So in order to land in that AI overview, I actually have to spend money and make sure that my exact match, phrase max, performance, I actually have to spend money to get there?
Oh, well, no. So to be mentioned in the AI overview at all, that's more like SEO. But in order to have an ad placement that runs within the AI overview, like the exact match type will not run on that inventory. That will only basically just like run your ads on the search in like the traditional search results page. But because the reasoning makes sense, because if you just target the exact match term for something software, let's say Clio as an example, like legal practice management software, and you tell Google it can only search those exact people. Well, that term is never going to trigger an AI overview, right? The thing that triggers an AI overview is like a whole paragraph. So of course that's why you need to be these more broader, opened up sort of targeting types to show up in there. But yeah, I was just talking about to have a sponsored ad show up within the
Oh,
placement
okay.
of the AI overview. But yeah, it's a lot more of an SEO game to make it so that like your website actually gets like referenced and talked about by Gemini, by Claude, by ChatGPT.
And like you said earlier, like there's now OpenAI is I
Oh,
think the first one that has allowed you to actually pay money and have ads inside their platform. Now there's some other things there, but how is that how has the new technology changed in the way that you put ads into placements in these other areas? Because it seems like it's not as simple as it once was.
yeah. So I think the internet cut out for a second, so I missed like the first little bit of the
Oh,
question. Are we still talking about ads running on, the Google search engine, or are we talking about ChatGPT or?
yeah. So the question there was ads now and the placement seems to be more challenging than it was before, especially with now having OpenAI. I think is the first one and maybe the only one that's allowing you to publish ads there.
Mhm.
How has that changed the way that the structure or even the strategy in order to be seen in all these different places? How has that changed for these companies?
Right. Well, it's interesting. Your ads showing up on the ChatGPT platform is cool because a lot of users are there, so it's useful ad real estate. But it still very much shows up as a sponsored ad in a fairly obvious way. So you can't actually pay to get ChatGPT to list you as the answer of a question in a way that looks like it's the natural answer that it's giving, right? That is all SEO stuff that you have to publish enough content on your website and all that. So that's a pretty separate conversation from the paid ads. And the reason that I bring up this distinction is I think there's a gigantically different value, right? It's probably like 10 times more valuable to have ChatGPT. If somebody asks who's the best Google Ads person in town, it's probably way better for ChatGPT to answer, go check out Brydon at Plateau PPC, than it is for them to, list some other person, but then I just have a sponsored ad that's like sitting up there next to them because there's obviously completely different trust levels there.
Right.
So I think the ChatGPT ads for right now are a pretty experimental thing. Nobody's using them as, and same thing with the stuff that I was talking about making sure that your ads are getting in the Google AI overviews, right? So technically, what you said is correct that yeah, you can't buy like Claude, like Anthropic ads right now, but um, in addition to ChatGPT, technically you can buy Google, once again like a sponsored placement that shows up inside of the AI overview,
Mm.
and uh but yeah, like it's it's I don't think anybody's using this as something where they found this as a really high ROI scalable channel yet. People are just sort of testing out ChatGPT ads because hey, why not? A lot of people are here, it's kind of new terrain, let's go see what happens. Some advertisers have had success. I think a lot more have not really had success because OpenAI hasn't really fine-tuned the platform itself yet, and like the back end targeting settings. So even though it's hugely valuable real estate, there's tons of buyers who are in ChatGPT every day. It's not the back end infrastructure to allow you to target the right people at the right time is not there the way that Google and Meta have spent decades building up that infrastructure and figuring that challenge out.
Yeah, this is a challenge that I am interested to learn more about, and I've been talking with others for a while. Of just where do you place your dollars today?
Hmm.
There's Meta, there's Google, there's Bing, there's ChatGPT, there's the SEO, there's all of these things. So the question is like, where should we put the money, and how do we
Hmm.
do it? Which is getting more challenging.
Yeah. I mean, and a big part of the reason it's getting more challenging is because these platforms are now so expensive, they're so competitive, and you're competing with big businesses that have gigantic budgets. So, the reason, or one of the main reasons, when I sort of defined my ICP, the clients that I work with as tech companies that are between 10 to 100 million ARR, is because those companies are probably already running Google Ads, and they're probably uh, but they're just not getting quite as good of a results as they want. But they already have a healthy budget. They already have plenty to test with and plenty to know. And they know that it works for them. They know that it's a channel that works, but maybe they need an agency to run it a little bit better. Their previous agency sort of hit a wall or something like that. And I specifically don't target people who have a small business and want to go from zero to getting Google Ads to sort of validate their business, because I think it's just such an expensive ad buy.
Hmm.
So it's not actually so sometimes I do get in conversations with these folks and they're saying, "Hey, can we test out $1,000 a month on Google Ads just to see if it can bring in some customers?" And I generally say that $1,000, I mean, I would just spend it elsewhere. I would hire a content specialist to help you make, 5 Instagram reels and then, post those and see if you can get some organic traction like that or something like that. There's just there are there are sort of guerrilla marketing methods and like really just sort of savvy like small business type stuff that you want to do before you want to start pouring money into these very 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 expensive ad platforms. But if like I said, if you've gotten the revenue engine in place and you have a really solid funnel and an offer that can convert, then yeah, go start putting money into that, because it's one of the easiest things to just scale up. You just give it more money, and if you know how to configure the settings and everything, then you'll start getting more revenue in return. And you can't scale up your own kind of guerrilla marketing methods as easily. But yeah, ad platforms, whether it be Google or Meta or anywhere else, are actually not at all where I recommend like early stage founders to be trying to acquire new customers.
Hmm. It's definitely a more challenging game to play, and even more potentially more confusing than it's ever been. So
Yeah.
I just looked at the time, Brad, and I said I'd get you out of here within an hour. So I want to live up to my word. I like to ask everybody at the end, is everybody likes new and nobody likes different. And when you do both at the same time, it can either cause friction or uncertainty. So for somebody who's thinking about building their demand gen engine or fine tuning their engine, what are 2 or 3 actionable things you would tell them? Hey, on Monday morning, go look here, go do these things, and it'll put you in a path for success. What would that be?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we spent, I guess, the first half of this podcast talking about me building my Dimension engine from scratch, and then the second half talking more about the ads part. I'll stick with the ads part, I guess, because I think it's been a more fruitful kind of portion of the conversation. So let's just say somebody is running ads and they want to figure out, yeah, what can I hop on Monday morning and go do? Look in your search terms and see if they actually align with the keywords that you think you're targeting. There's a decent chance that there's some misalignment there and that there's spend that's being wasted, because Google is actually going and targeting users who have nothing to do with your product or service and are completely unqualified and will never buy from you. So that would be like the number one thing that I would take a look at. The second is to consider, what are you tracking and measuring as a conversion on your ads. If it's just some very low friction, lead form submission, for example, when it comes to like a B2B lead gen kind of business, then you're training the algorithm to get as many of those as possible. But that doesn't actually necessarily mean you're going to get as much revenue as possible. So you want to start thinking, how can I start training the algorithm, feeding it qualified leads or some kind of, after after the users already showed up for the product demo and they have the means and the desire to actually purchase this type of product or service. Maybe that's what you consider a conversion. And there's like a whole process you can just look up on, like how to set up offline conversions to have that. But those inputs are the things that are going to take your Google Ads account from being, you know, okay to really good
Hmm.
from an ROI perspective.
Uh, 2 really good ones. Look into your search terms, because you're probably wasting money, and make sure you find it. And then look at the what are you tracking in the KPIs. Like two really good actionable things you can look at. Maybe you find some nuggets in there, but Brydon, I appreciate this, and we likely should have started with this topic because we got about halfway through, and I was like, "Oh, there's a whole new world that I don't know about,"
Yeah.
and it's been a lot of fun to learn. So for somebody who's like, "Hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what Brydon does or follow him," like, where would you tell them to connect or follow?
Yeah, just I would say just check out my LinkedIn. Yeah, it's just Brydon McMillen, Brydon. I don't think too many people have my first name, so it's not that hard to find me. And then there's my website as well, plateauppc.com. If anybody wants to check that out, but it would probably be easier to get a hold of me or get in touch with me just on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, this has been a little bit of an eye opener, I'll say it that way, about like learning in this space. And I appreciate you kind of opening it up, because some of the things I didn't like: broad match, AI max, performance max, phrase max, exact math. Like, it's a different world, and it's not one that I've had a chance to really spend a lot of time in. So thank you for educating me and allowing me the space to ask you some of these kind of silly questions. But this has been, I appreciate you jumping on today and sharing, and hopefully there's lots of success with Plateau.
Thanks for having me on, Karl. It's been a pleasure. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. Obviously, want to thank Brydon for sharing incredibly invaluable insights and some strategies you can put into action. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, it's Karl with Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn your obstacles into your opportunities. Thanks for investing your time with us today. See you on the next episode.